12.
Subantarctic Islands Marine Reserves Bill, first reading.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Kate Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Subantarctic Islands Marine Reserves Bill be now read a first time. I nominate the Local Government and Environment Select Committee to consider this bill. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand's Subantarctic Islands, the Antipodes Island Group, Bounty Islands, Auckland Island and Campbell Island and Snares Islands are located in the south-east of New Zealand's exclusive economic zone. The islands and their surrounding territorial seas are internationally important for their conservation values and were awarded UNESCO World Heritage status in 1998. The land area of each of the Subantarctic Islands is fully protected through having National Reserve and Nature Reserve status. They contain exceptional marine biodiversity in a remote setting, largely free from human impacts, resulting in near-pristine ecosystems. The islands generate significant economic activity through a multi-million-dollar wildlife tourism industry that brought between 800 and 1,100 tourists visiting the islands in each of the last 2 seasons. Local and international visitors want to experience the climate and iconic wildlife. The islands are absolutely stunning, with an abundance of native species: albatross, penguins, sea lions, fur seals and southern right whales. The islands, Mr. Speaker, are protected as nature reserves befitting their World Heritage status, but it is not only the islands that were considered World Heritage. The high conservation values continue to the sea, as does the World Heritage status, which extends to the limits of the territorial sea surrounding the islands, reserves around the Bounty Islands and Campbell Island, covering 58% and 39%, and I think I've lost one of my pages, but that's all right.
I'm sure you can find it.
I'm sure I will, Mr. Speaker. The reserves around the Bounty Islands, Campbell Island, and they cover 58% and 39% of those islands' territorial seas, respectively. In total, Mr. Speaker, 435,163 hectares will be protected in these marine reserves. Mr. Speaker, combined with the existing marine reserves around the Auckland Islands, nearly 1 million hectares of New Zealand and subantarctic territorial sea will then be fully protected in a no-take marine reserves. No longer will marine conservation be lagging behind the terrestrial protection in what is one of the world's most ecologically important natural areas. As on land, beneath the surface of the sea, each island group is significantly different, each with its own unique suite of habitats and species. For example, Antipodes Island rocky reefs are dominated by encrusting coralline algae, and the island has its own unique species of bull kelp, while the reefs at the neighbouring Bounty Islands are dominated by encrusting animals such as sponges, barnacles and mussels. But the difference does not end there. While all the subantarctic island terrestrial areas are fully protected already as national nature reserves, only at the Auckland Islands has a similar level of protection been afforded to the marine environment through the establishment of a marine reserve back in 2003. This bill rectifies that situation by extending protection out into the territorial sea around 3 of the subantarctic island groups. Protection that befits the World Heritage status has been accorded. I must emphasise, Mr. Speaker, that this bill is the result of a stakeholder-led process. Representatives of science, iwi, fishing and conservation groups gathered to examine the areas, their marine biodiversity and the island's associated stakeholder interests. After public consultation, recommendations were made for marine protected areas in the territorial sea round the Antipodes, Bounty and Campbell Island groups. The bill progresses the work of the Stakeholder Forum by establishing the marine reserve around the Antipodes, covering its entire territorial sea, that is out to 12 nautical miles, and as stated, it establishes 2 large marine reserves around the Bounty Islands and Campbell Island, covering 58% and 38% of those islands' territorial seas, respectively. Mr. Speaker, my colleague, the Honourable David Carter, Minister for Primary Industries, is adding further protection to the remainder of the territorial sea. In addition to existing prohibitions on bottom trawling and dredging, new prohibitions on Danish seining will be introduced, an additional 250,000 hectares around the 3 island groups. This means the territorial sea of all 3 island groups will have achieved marine protected status. The creation of marine reserves through the bill recognises existing users. The established ling fishery will be allowed to continue using long lining in some areas around the Bounty Islands, as this technique has a very limited bycatch. The bill also grants a 5-year window to allow for a potential deep-water crab fishery to be explored around Campbell Island. At the end of that 5-year period, the status of this area will be reviewed. If it's decided that a viable and sustainable crab fishery does not exist, then the entire territorial sea around Campbell Island could become a marine reserve. Mr Speaker, these will be the first marine protected areas to be implemented under the Government's Marine Protected Areas policy that sets out New Zealand's new, more coordinated and collaborative approach to protecting our marine biodiversity. The Government is introducing the bill in order to establish these marine reserves in a timely and efficient manner. This recognises the comprehensive process undertaken by the Forum in planning for and consulting on the Marine Reserves proposal. To proceed with individual applications for each marine reserve under the existing Marine Reserves Act 1971 would be to duplicate some of the processes that the Forum has already undertaken. Mr Speaker, this Government is looking to update that old Marine Reserves legislation to provide for a better statutory process for establishing marine reserves in due course. In the meantime, however, this bill will give the seas surrounding 3 of New Zealand's subantarctic islands the protection they deserve. This bill fulfils the expectations of the World Heritage Committee that New Zealand will protect these internationally recognised conservation values in a manner befitting their status. Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Mr Speaker.
The question